My name is Franklin, and I'm an atheist. I've read a lot about religion, but reading tells you little about how it's actually practiced. 76% of people in the United States claim some sort of religion. Christians, Buddhists, Jedi. What is it about their religion that resonates with who they are? How does their religion make them a better person? And what do they think is still missing about how we understand the world? My goal is to grow my knowledge and wither my ignorance. I think it's important to talk to them and find out what they believe. I normally do this at the end of an episode, but hey, here's the thing. If I were to say the word Quaker, you might think oats, which I'm sure would delight PepsiCo since they currently own that brand. Originally, they were called the General Mills American Oatmeal Company. One of their partners had read that Quakers were known for their integrity and purity and honesty, so he named their new mill the Quaker Mill Company, even though they were not Quakers. He just wanted to borrow some of their credibility. With that in mind, I'd like to welcome you to the Lutheran Cancer-Curing Laser Show, even though none of that's true, at least until I get a Lutheran on the show, and they can bring their own lasers. And if they could bring a cure for cancer, that'd be great. What are they talking about? Oh yeah, today we're talking to the Religious Society of Friends, or Quakers. Hello and welcome to the What They Believe series. Today I'm speaking with Chris and Alice of the Religious Society of Friends. Why two people? The Quakers don't really have clergy, so instead I'm speaking with two friends. Chris and Alice, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, why did you become a Quaker? Or a friend, if you will.
I grew up in the Presbyterian church in a family that went to Sunday school and church every Sunday. And when I left home, I had an opportunity to explore. You know, I was a young person. I went out Saturday night and slept in Sunday morning. But then a few years into my 20s, I felt like I didn't have a spiritual outlet. I didn't know quite what that meant, but a friend of mine said, well, come check out the Quakers. All you have to believe is that there's that of God in every person. And I thought, well, that sounds good. So I went, I felt instantly at home. I started going regularly. And the way membership works, they don't sign you up right away. They expect you to attend and see if this is for you. 3 years down the road, I was at a professional conference, and it was after hours and socializing, and somebody said, hey, I heard you are involved with the Quakers. Tell me about that. And I talked on and on for like 45 minutes, and I realized I'm a Quaker. So I presented a letter to the clerk. I was given a clearness committee for membership to meet with me and decide if I'm clear. They decided I was. I decided I was, and it was taken to business meeting and approved. And that was 1978.
And Chris?
I also was raised as Presbyterian, kind of moved away from it after college. As my wife and I had children and were looking for a religious, spiritual home for our family, we went to a number of churches and tried different approaches, and none of them seemed right. But then we were looking for a school situation for our children, and we went to the Carolina Friends School, which is a Quaker school. It was actually founded by the Chapel Hill Friends and the Durham Friends together, and we were just amazed. Basically, the culture of the school, the way the children were treated, the way the teachers treated each other, the philosophy of what was going on there, the level of equality between teachers and students, and honest inquiry. And so we found a home for our children, but then we started thinking, well, there's more to this than just the school. And so we started investigating the Chapel Hill Friends meeting and found the same thing there that Alice was talking about, a level of comfort, a level of feeling at home and feeling like we had found what we needed. So again, after attending a while, we did a clearness committee. One of the elder people of the meeting, who had been a Quaker a long time, And I said, I'm a little confused by the fact that the Quakers have no stated dogma, no set of beliefs that we're supposed to profess this is what we believe. And she said, well, that's because Quakers are seekers. And I thought, that's right. That's exactly what I am.
Both of you mentioned being clear or a clearness committee. What does that mean, being clear?
There's not really a word in English, clearness. Usually it's clarity, but this is a Quaker term. And clearness committees are a wonderful part of the experience of being part of a meeting. You can have one for membership, you can have one for marriage, and or for personal discernment. If you're struggling with something, you can ask for a clearness committee, and usually it's 4 people will come and meet with you. And what you're supposed to do in that circumstance is listen deeply, ask questions that occur to you, and just be there and until the person becomes clear, which can take a couple hours. It's different with everyone, but that's what I guess being clear means this is the right thing for you to do.
I was doing my research. I saw that about half of all Quakers live in African countries. Do you have any idea why this would be?
Well, there's the evangelical Quakers. That's another branch. They had missionaries, and they went overseas and were very successful. And then there's imperialism.
It works its way into a lot of subjects.
Quakerism is ultimately rooted in Christian philosophy. In your opinion, what is sin?
I don't normally think in terms of sin, but to answer your question, I would say that sin is a violation of something that I know to be wrong. As I mentioned, we don't have a set dogma as Quakers, although I think I don't really want to speak for all Quakers because there are so many different kinds. But in my experience, Quakers all believe that there's that of God in all of us. It is our job to look in ourselves and find the truth, look for that of God within ourselves in order to find the truth, which is continually revealed throughout our lives. And I think all Quakers also embrace a set of testimonies of simplicity, peace, integrity, community, and equality. And to me, sin would be violating what we have found, the truth that we have found in ourselves that we know to be true, and consciously doing something that is against that.
In my research, I learned that you welcome atheists into your congregations. With that, I'll ask the question I've asked some of my previous guests. Is Quakerism a religion, a philosophy, or a way of life?
Yes.
Fair enough.
But I think there's more to be said. We call them non-theists. And let me specify that Chris and I are part of the unprogrammed tradition. There are other branches that have ministers and could seem more like a Baptist church or something in their style of worship. But unprogrammed friends are supposedly closer to the way George Fox started this in the 1600s. And there have been separations over time so that there are some, usually it's called a friend's church if there's a pastor, and a friend's meeting if it's unprogrammed. But we like to say we haven't done away with clergy, we've done away with laity, because we all minister to each other. And I think the testimony of community is one of the strongest ones.
It is what you make it. It's such an individual approach to religion. It is what you make it. Since we're responsible for our own search within ourselves, it's up to the individual to decide whether it's a religion, a philosophy, or a way of living.
I would say I think it's really, for me, a way of life. And I was searching for that. My Presbyterian church experiences, everybody dressed up on Sunday and did nothing the rest of the week. I don't think that's true. But I was looking for something that felt like 24/7, a way of life. So if you think about, if you believe that there's that of God in every person, we call it the inner light, if you're not comfortable with the word God or spirit.
A member of another Friends meeting group I know said that Quakers try to be on the right side of things, but don't always succeed. What guiding principles do you use to find what you consider the right side of any difficult topics, such as voting rights, animal welfare, prison reform, what have you?
We certainly have a vibrant community at Quaker meeting and no shortage of opinions and information and inclinations. But it still is up to each of us as an individual to move forward as we are led, as they say. And we try to live the testimonies, as I mentioned, but we live them as we are personally led. It has to be an individual thing.
And here comes another favorite Quaker word, discernment, involving study, reflection, deep prayerful consideration, talking with other friends to decide what seems right and best and where you are led. When I was early in Friends, sitting in silence for an hour each Sunday, I found that if I had something I was struggling with in my life, and I sat in the meeting with other friends, which felt really different from trying to meditate at home, because you felt people's energy and presence. Slowly, over some period of time, I began to hear what I came to call my inner voice. And, it's like the first thing that occurs to you is not always the wisest. So sitting still and trusting that the way will open can take some time. But I found that when I got to that deep place, there was a wholeness, like this is the right thing for me to do.
There's also a power in gathered worship that is interesting, that I've found new revelations from over the years of doing it. Sitting when we were meeting together, now in the days of COVID, we do it by Zoom, which is difficult, but when we were meeting together, I would sometimes be listening and someone would say something, and honestly, in my dark little mind, I would think, well, that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And then we would sit there a little bit and somebody else would say something else. And I would think, that's really strange. And then somebody else would say something else. And all of a sudden I would think, those three things come together in a way that had never struck me before and take you in a direction that you were not expecting at all. I've come to trust that.
Do you believe that the natural state of the universe moves toward goodness?
I have no idea. I hope so, but I have no idea. I'm a seeker. I'm not really a philosopher. I hope it's moving towards goodness, but I wouldn't dare to answer. Alice?
Yeah, I kind of, it's like I would like to think so, but I don't know. It's interesting. I asked my husband this. He immediately said, yes. I think we all play our part in moving the world towards goodness. And that's an important responsibility to do that every day as well as we can.
The term survival of the fittest was coined by a detractor of Darwin's Origin of the Species. Much like the Big Bang Theory was coined by a detractor of that theory. What do you think of the common name of your organization being called Quakers? And that was coined by somebody who was charging the founder with blasphemy.
I think Friends is better. I think Alice was certainly right. There is an aspect of quaking in the experience of worship together when you feel that sense that there's something that you need to say and quake inside and until it's set free. So I don't have any problem with Quakers. It doesn't seem pejorative. I don't have any problem with it, but I think Friends is better.
the idea George Fox had was, all right, they're going to call us this name, we'll embrace it and reframe it, redefine it.
George Soros, Charles Koch, and the Religious Society of Friends are all on the same side when it comes to the subject of prison reform, if such issues can be divided into simply being for or against. Can you tell me why prison reform is important to you?
Quakers got interested in this because they were in prison a lot in the beginning, persecuted, and found out intimately what conditions were like. And now, Chris, I'm gonna turn it over to you because you're involved in our prison work now.
Well, I am, and I get a lot more out of it than I give. The fundamental reason is because Quakers believe in the light of God in all of us. At the end of our meeting for worship, we always say we embrace all people, no exceptions. The first thing you find out when you go to a prison and meet with the people there is that there is the light of God in everyone. And you also find just an amazing resource of talent and intelligence and perception in people who are locked up there. And so you are almost immediately overcome with a desire to improve this situation and make it more what it really should be, rehabilitative and so much more. So I have been part of a group that is a listening ministry at a prison here in Hillsborough. And we just meet with the men at the prison. And as we say, it's a listening ministry. So you just talk with them. There are certainly people in prison who are disturbed, would have a hard time coping with society anyway. But there are people who've just made mistakes and have changed. I remember talking with a man who's been there for 35 years. And I said to him, he went to prison when he was 15. And I said, you were tried as an adult when you were 15. And he said, yes. He said it was a particularly horrific, vicious murder. I sat and looked at him and he said, but I'm not the man that I was then. People change. People grow. I think we have a lot to learn from the people who are there. This
program is called Yoke Fellows. And my understanding is that it was started by a Quaker way, probably 50, 60, 70 years ago. It's really enriched our meeting because the majority of these men are African American. The 13th Amendment, has this phrase in there about freed from slavery unless you're a criminal. Some of these guys, they didn't have the resources, like if any one of our kids got in trouble with the law when they're teenagers, we get them a lawyer, we would pull out the stops and, young people do dumb things. And some of these didn't have support at home, didn't have financial resources and ended up in prison. And it's really tragic.
I have a Zoom session tonight at 7:30 with a young man who was released on June the 6th. And I've continued to stay in touch with him. He's gone back home to Michigan, where he was from, and is re-entering society and trying to work his way through the changes that have come about in the time that he was away. And like I say, we get more out of it than we give.
The United States has not had a draft for almost 50 years. If it were activated for a just war, would you refuse?
I want to speak to this because I have a son who is now 33, but when he was 15 or 16, they were talking about in Congress bringing back the draft. And I had a sleepless night or two. And at that time, I was on the Youth Religious Education Committee, and we got talking about it. And we decided, because there's a long tradition among Quakers of conscientious objection to war, 3 of us decided we would work something up. And we created a curriculum for the high school group. we got some of the elders in our meeting who had been conscientious objectors in previous wars to come down and tell them their story. And there's a program called Quaker House, which we helped start down in Fayetteville, right in the shadow of Fort Bragg. That's a council's GIs, and has one of the few of those programs that came out during the Vietnam War that's still going. Anyway, we took them on a field trip down there, and the director at the time brought one of the soldiers he'd been counseling over to tell his story. And I can remember my son wasn't really wanting to go on this trip. You know, he had other things that he was, but later he said that was the best thing, hearing this soldier's story, because a lot of the soldiers signed up for the college money. You know, they didn't have resources. At the present, there's no CO law. Once you're in the military, there's some kind of rule that you can apply for CO, but it would be nice to do it ahead of time. So when we got their registration for selective service, where there's no place to say that you're a CO, so they would sign in between the lines, I'm a conscientious objector. 2 of the trustees of the meeting would sign it. You send it off, and of course, then you get a letter back saying there's no such thing, but it's got a date on it. So if down the road, you know, you can say, well, I've been thinking about this since. Anyway, that's been a very successful program, and we've even had some of our girls do this.
Chris, do you have anything?
When I was actually eligible for the draft was the Vietnam War, and I was from Eastern North Carolina, and my county would not accept a conscientious objector letter under any circumstance. I opposed the war and actively marched against it and all like that, but I was fortunate that they called me up for my physical, but I never actually had to go and end up in jail. My personal approach to that war was that I would not participate, but again, it was partly because I considered it an unjust war, and your question was not that. Quakers have a history of making decisions both ways. One of the testimonies is for peace. Sometimes we have to stand up to evil. Individuals have to make their decisions about what that means. I remember my father attending our Quaker meeting and being very disturbed by our stance against war, because he had been in World War II, and it disturbed him no end to say, but you know, sometimes you have to stand up. What if everybody had just let Hitler do what he was going to do? We all have to make our decision and decide, is the light that we see and how we're going to act on it. And more importantly, we all have to recognize each other's decisions on that. Quakers have opposed wars. Quakers have participated in wars. Quakers have served as medics or as non-combatants. There are a lot of choices, a lot of ways you can handle that. And in my mind, it's up to each of us as individuals to decide where we're led.
And I think in the beginning, George Fox was saying the teachings of Jesus, say love your enemies. That's what we're trying to do. But there's been that tradition, but it's not 100% like Chris is saying.
I'd like to thank Chris and Alice for joining us here today. Chris and Alice, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, here's the thing. Fred Boyce was accepted to a special school. Well, accepted's the wrong term. Fred Boyce was abandoned by his parents and sent to the Fernald State School in Waltham, Massachusetts. Fred felt lucky to get into the science club. It meant more food, and he even got to see the Red Sox play at Fenway Park. Fred didn't know that the science they conducted there 20 years earlier was eugenics. It was now 1949, and the world was entering the atomic age. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was using the most cutting-edge technology of the time. They fed the children an enhanced diet of calcium and iron, and injected them with radioactive isotopes. These boys, aged between 10 and 17, could not possibly have given their consent for this. And in the case of Fred Boyce, his parents could not either. This study was at least partially funded by Quaker Oats. On this, I'll say that I'm really glad I'm not a Quaker. I'd be furious to know I was in any way associated with this. Well, thanks for watching, and may the road rise with you.
She loves me.
The worst part about not meeting in person, I would definitely want to pet your dog.